Hello, welcome to the Wool Wonder podcast. My name is Frances and this is my regular podcast where I talk to you about my knitting, a little bit about Hugo the dog here, and about some other things that make me smile. Today I've got finished objects, I've got works in progress, and I've got new cast on ideas. I've been to a wool show recently and I'll have some things to share with you about that as well. So let's start with what I'm wearing, and this is the Nola cardigan by Yamagara, and it was inspired by watching the Danish Musings podcast sometime probably last summer or so, and she did it in I think a whitey off-white colour, maybe with some black flowers, possibly might be navy, and I just loved it and I thought yes, I'd love to do that. So I found some yarn at Stitches and Cream, and the yarn I knitted it in, it actually asked for a super bulky, but it's 16 stitches per centimetre. Does that smell good? Ah, okay. So I used, it's the Fibre Company's and Make Aram. And that's what I use for my main colour. And then with the flowers, I looked at what I had in my stash. Yep, that smells good too, doesn't it? And this is the Rowan Alpaca Soft. Held that double to get the right tension. So that's that in there. And then this is a worsted yarn, which I only held single, but it seems to have worked fine, that I used in my Fern and Feather jumper. So I cast on, and you cast on at the top, so you're knitting it in one piece from the top downwards, and I think you start with that, with your band, your button band at the top, cast on, and then you're adding stitches by increasing on the raglans as you've got down here. Then got down to the sleeves and divided for the sleeves. And then on this pattern, you knitted the sleeves first, and you knit them flat because they're intarsia. And I think at this point, can we do this with do you think? What do you think? Yeah. Try not to wriggle too much because it puts you off, doesn't it? Okay, right. So there you can see. And when you're knitting intarsia, you're knitting the main colour, and then you're swapping over and dropping the main colour for the contrast colour, twisting the yarns round each other so that you're not getting any holes, then coming across and then picking up the yarn on the other side. And of course that will be a different yarn to the one that you've left behind there. and again, twisting the yarns round and going back onto the main colour. So you have to be, I find when you're doing intarsia, you have to be really quite careful not to get holes, to keep your stitches sizes even, and yeah, as I say, making sure that you're twisting those yarns to ensure that you're not getting holes. But it looks lovely. It's come out beautiful. So we knitted it flat, seamed those seams, and then went back and I did the body, and the body was straightforward. So the sleeves come in two options in the pattern. You can either do a lovely big floaty sleeve, or you can do a straightforward traditional tapering sleeve. And I actually decided to go for something in between. So I did the lovely floaty sleeve, the sizing for that, continued it right down to the cuffs, to just before the cuffs. And then I did a rapid decrease, and then did a traditional rib cuff, because I knew those beautiful floaties, and they do look fabulous, and you can see from the photos, that it was just going to get in the way. It was going to, I don't know, I was worried I was going to get it in my dinner, or, caught on the dog or the knitting or what. I just didn't think it was going to work for me. And so, yeah, this works a lot better. I really like this. It's still got the impact of the lovely big sleeves, but it's got a practicality as well. So as I say, I'm really pleased with this. I finished it in September last year, and that was at a time when I wasn't doing any podcasts, so hence I haven't shown it to you before. Still needs some buttons. I did buy some beautiful buttons for it when we were on the Isles of Scilly back in April, but I managed to lose these buttons, so I need to look for some more, and I'll probably have a look on Textile Gardens website, which is my go-to place to get buttons. You could just see it's half term and Hugo has just seen some children walking on the pavement on the other side. And children spell fun and games, don't they, Hugo? Yeah. Which you're possibly not having at the moment, apart from being allowed to snip the yarn. So I love this. I've worn it a lot. The yarn has worn fairly well. Slight bobbling, but not serious bobbling. And it's a really nice layer to throw on the top of a dress. So I've been so pleased with it. I have decided that I'm going to knit the second one. And I'm thinking that I'm going to knit it in a navy with an off-white. Do you think that would look right? Yeah. So the navy that I've got here is Rowan Island Blend. It's a yarn that's not in their current offering. However, you will find it still in plenty of shops. And then the mohair is Rowan's Kids Silk Haze. And I'm going to hold those two together and see if I can hit that tension, which is 16 stitches for 10 centimeters or 4 inches. I found with the pattern actually asked for a super bulky yarn. This yarn was an Aran that I knitted it in. And obviously here I've got a double knit and a strand of the fine. So I don't know if that will work. And if it doesn't work, then I'll have a play around with it and see if I can find one, maybe hold two strands of the Kids Silk Haze or something like that, if that will work. And then I'll need to look for an off-white for the flowers. I probably won't do a centre for it. I think I'll probably just use the centre as the main colour. But yeah, that's my plans. If that doesn't work, then I'll use this yarn for something else, because it's yarn I've got in my stash from when I worked at the Rowan shop. So if that doesn't work, I'll try using something else, because I really would love to have that in my wardrobe. So moving on, I've got more finished items, and I was still knitting these when I talked to you in my podcast last time. And the first one is the Traveller Cow by Andrea Mowry. You all right there? Are you comfortable? Yes? I think really it's a trade-off he's happy to do because he can see out the window. Don't you? Eh? You quite like sitting here, seeing what's going on. So, I finished one. This is knitted in Rowan's Pebble Island. And the Andrea Mowry cow is designed to sit like a well-dressed shawl, but it is actually just a piece that's then seamed at the back, but sits on there to give you that. Now this one, the Pebble Island version, I've knitted it using a garter stitch pattern from the Plateau cardigan, which was a cardigan by Erica Knight, a Rowan pattern that I knitted last year. And I copied the stitch pattern that she had on there rather than the one on the Andrea Mowry, but I'm still using the Andrea Mowry pattern for the shape, which of course is the crucial part for it. I've given it a narrower neck, so that it sits higher. So I wanted it to be really snug, so it would be perfect for winter walks. The pattern, for depending on the yarn you're using, and probably to an extent the knitter, it can have a tight I-cord. And I have seen on Ravelry, or maybe it was on the pattern notes. Probably was the pattern notes, because it was Andrea Mowry talking about how some people can have difficulty with the I-cord and it can be too tight. Now it needs to have a certain firmness to it, the I-cord, because the fabric is in garter stitch, and that can make it very sort of stretchy and grows, and the I-cord sort of keeps it in, holds it together, if you like, and stops it stretching out too much. And I found I didn't have any problems with my I-cord being tight on the other ones that I knitted, but on this one, which is more of a worsted weight, the Rowan Pebble Island, I did find some difficulty. So what Andrea Mowry suggests you do is, when you come to the I-cord and you knit it, you then slip the I-cord stitches back again every so often and knit them a second time on the same row. And I did that for maybe every 4 to six rows, something like that. And that just gave that little bit of give. Otherwise, what you found was that it was pulling, the I-cord was pulling down and becoming offset from the stripes. So, are you wanting to go down now? Are you? Yeah? Okay. You don't know what you want, do you? No. Okay. So that is my Pebble Island version. And then I knitted another one. Should we reach it? We got it. You go. There we go. That one smells good, doesn't it? Very sheepy. Absolutely. So this is a whole new one that I cast on since I spoke to you last. And this is made from my leftover Advent pieces from, really doesn't go with the yellow, does it? From my Advent last year, which was a Blue Fern Yarns Advent with a coastal theme. And I've held it together with, let's see if I've got it, just a Mac. And I've held it together with, so the contrast colour is from Wool Decanted, and it's called, this is Vintage 20. And they have Wool Decanted, they named their batches, if you like, for each year, Vintage 20, Vintage 21, 23, what have you. So then you know that if you get them all from that, so if they're all Vintage 20, that they're going to be the same dye lot. So that's the grey contrast colour that you've got in there, and the blue and greeny coloured stripes are all from the Advent. And this is for my daughter. It's not my kind of colours, which you may, those of you that watch me regularly may recognise. It's not really my colours, but this is for my daughter, and it is really rather lovely. I'm hoping the yarn, the Wool Decanted yarn, is not quite as soft as something like the Pebble Island. So I'm hoping that she still finds it soft enough. She has got quite sensitive skin. So let's hope that she's going to find that okay. Are you okay? Are you being fidgety? Are you being fidgety? Yeah. Shall we tell everybody about the other traveller cow that we've got? Do you think so? Okay. Right. Ready? Right. Do you want to go down? So I need to get up and get it. Okay. Right. So apparently Hugo didn't want to go anywhere. So what I noticed with the different traveller cows is that the different yarns make a difference on the drape, and where this one sits a little bit more stiffly, when we come over to this one, this is my traveller cow using the yarn left over from my tessellated cardigan. And it's sock yarn and some fluff, and it's very drapey. It's very soft, isn't it? Yes. And this is where the I-cord is really needed in order to keep everything together and not to stretch down too much. So I'm just trying to see if I think I showed this to you last time, didn't I? And I thought I might have this finished this time, but I reckon I need to do about another 5 of these ridges to get there. So we're very nearly there. But yeah, if this didn't have the I-cord holding it, I think it would stretch even more. But this is going to be beautiful. I can't wait to wear this. And actually, it's kind of fitting that this is the one I haven't finished yet. So the Pebble Island one, I really needed that. We've had some horrible cold weather recently, and it's been really nice having that nice and warm around my neck. Whereas the tessellated one, because it's a thinner yarn, I think I'll be able to wear it more into the spring. So I think that actually will work really well. Okay, now Hugo's decided to go and have an explore elsewhere. I think what he'd really like to do is sit on the windowsill here, but it's just a little bit too narrow for him, and I think it just might end in tragedy. Normally, when my studio's the way it is normally, I've got my desk near the window, and he likes to sit on the end of my desk and look out and watch people go by. And as I say, he particularly likes to watch the children. There's lots of children around today because it's school holidays. So moving on to other finished projects, and I finished this I can't remember where I finished this actually. This yarn was, what was it called? I think it was called Mousehole Lights. It was something to do with Mousehole. Mousehole is a beautiful fishing village in Cornwall, down on the south coast, not far from Penzance. And they had these lovely lights on at Christmas time. And this yarn is from Stitches and Cream, and I can't remember who the dyer was now, but that's where this yarn came from. It was a sock yarn, and it came with a pink, and there was tiny bits of pink in this yarn. I'll bring it up closely to you. Anyway, I did a number of different attempts at different hats, which I shared with you last spring, and I just couldn't get the pink to work with it. I wasn't happy with how it was, so I put the pink to one side. It's sitting in my stash and will no doubt be used for some kind of contrast in something or another. And I just did it with this lovely yarn, and I decided to do the Musselburgh Hat. Now the Musselburgh Hat you cast on, and I can't remember the name of the cast on, so I'm going to put it up there. Sorry, I did mean to look that up before I started. But you cast on with this centre in here, and then you're working out increasing. And when you get to a certain point with it, you then measure your tension, your tension, your gauge, and then based on how many stitches you got within a certain measurement, which I can't remember off the top of my head, determines how many that against the circumference of the size hat you want determines how many stitches you should have on for your overall hat. So I did that, and you knit it, and you go. I'm gonna just grab you a different Musselburgh hat, and this is what you end up doing. So you increase out here, so it's like a sort of tube, a closed off tube, and then you decrease that down there, and then your hat is a double layer hat, which is something worth bearing in mind, because depending on the yarn you use, that can make it really quite thick. And certainly in the UK, I'm not sure you would really need anything above a DK double thickness. So this is a sock yarn, but I got the tension wrong on this. And I don't know, I obviously did measure it wrong because it is too big. But it is lovely. It's very nice. But as I say, it is too big, so it is going to end up probably being gifted to somebody. I think I don't know. I think I've got the inclination to undo it and reknit it. But it was a great lesson of knitting a Musselburgh and finding out what a great pattern it is. And it is a hugely popular pattern, and you can understand why. So I then got this fabulous yarn, and I'll put a photograph up here of it, from Yarntings, who were exhibiting at the Glasgow School of Yarn, which is slightly surprising because they're based in London. And I kind of picked up that she had an accent more down from my neck of the woods, because I originate from North London. Although she's not North London, I think she's South London. But and she did a talk that we went to, a couple of us that were on the Wool and Walks tour, and she did a talk at the Glasgow School of Yarn, and it was really interesting. It was really, really fun. She's a performer as well, and she did some dancing and some singing, and I think she was playing an instrument, and it was a lot of fun to listen to, and obviously she's a passionate knitter, and she's a mum, and there were lots of great things she was telling us about her days on a canal, living on a canal boat and that sort of thing. So I got this fabulous yarn, and I decided to make a Musselburgh out of it. I was getting quite cold, and I could really do with a thicker hat than the one I've got, and so it's not actually double knit. This is, I think, probably a sport weight, and So yeah, it's a little bit thicker than a 4-ply. So I think it's a sport weight. But anyway, it doesn't really matter with the Musselburgh hat. You don't need to know what thickness of your yarn is. Again, you just need to measure how many stitches you've got at a certain point, and that dictates to you how big you want your hat. So that was what I did. I didn't change the size. I just decided when I measured my previous one that actually it came out a lot bigger than the size I was aiming for, and therefore it was a tension issue and not that I'd chosen the wrong size. So as I say, this is that. So I started at this end, and as you can see, it's a colour changing up, and it's interesting, isn't it, how it's sort of stripy here, but then when you get here, it starts doing this kind of diagonal stripes of colour with the blue, which I thought were rather pretty. But I kind of got to about here and I was running out of yarn, which was such a shame. So what I did, I had a dig around in my stash and I found a couple of yarns that I knitted together to make a double knit yarn. So that I think they were so I think they were 4-ply or sock yarn, and they made a colour. You can see that blue there, but you can see it's very similar, very hard to pick out. But then I started to space out the amount of times I was knitting the skein from Yarntings so that I could bring it up as close as possible to the top of the crown, and I think it works quite effectively. And I tend to wear it this way because I do prefer these little running lines as opposed to that way, even though the colour is right at the top. But you could do it either way, and you could have one colour there or one pattern there, something else like that. A lot of them have brims. I don't wear this with a brim. I didn't want a brim on it, but you could make it a bit longer. So for example, on this one, it was supposed to have a brim. And so you could do that and turn that back, and it would mean it would be extra thick around your ears if you wanted that. However, I'm having a little bit of a problem. This is a lovely hat and it does keep me warm, but I have noticed that a lot of hats slide off my head. Gradually, very gradually, start off looking great and they gradually slide off my head. I did one in the Pebble Island yarn, which was the yarn that I used in this one. I did a hat first with it. That slides off my head. This is a little bit better. I think the fit is, I was careful not to make it too tight, because the tighter it is, the snugger it is, the more it wants to travel. And I think it's because I've got slippy hair, and where there's a slippy yarn, it's not gripping, because interestingly enough, the two hats that do sit on my head and don't travel off are made of, so one's Rowan felted tweed. It's an old Marie Wallin pattern, which is really nice. The only thing is, I'd say probably the depth is not quite, could do with being a little bit deeper. And then I have a hat, and I knocked up really quickly when we were working at the shop, which is a strand of Alpaca Classic and a strand of Kid Silk Haze. Now both of those are quite 2-feed sort of sticky yarns, and that doesn't come off my head at all. So I'm thinking that I might try, because I'm almost at a point, in fact, to be honest, the tessellated traveller cowl that I just showed you there is getting too big to be a very portable project anyway, so I could do with a new portable project. So I'm tempted to use 2 strands of the Kid Silk Haze. As I say, you can use any yarn when you're knitting the Musselburgh hat. So all I'll do is hold those 2 strands together and knit to that certain point, measure my gauge carefully, and then that will tell me how many stitches I need. So I could do that, and then so that's what I think I'll give that a go. So it'll end up being a double thickness because it's the Musselburgh, but of course of a much finer yarn, it'll be a much finer fabric, and it might be quite a nice thing to have as a travel project. It would be quite slow because, as I say, it's fine yarn, but you know, it's often the case, isn't it, when it's a fine yarn, it does end up knitting something beautiful when we eventually get there. So that's my plans, but yeah, we'll see where we get. I'm I'm not rushing to do that one, but that's my thoughts with that really. So now moving on to the things I'm working on, and what I've really been enjoying working on is the Judith Cardigan by Jackie Blogg. Now this is a pattern that's not on Ravelry. I have had quite a few questions about this, and frustratingly at the moment the website is down, but I would say be patient with it. So you need to, what you do is you buy the kit. You can buy the pattern separately, I think, but generally she sells it as a kit, and that's how I bought it, is as a kit. I also noticed when I did Google that I think I found a yarn shop that's quite close to where Jackie's based that sells her yarn and patterns, so that may be another option as well. And I will look into that more, and I will try it and see if I can message Jackie. It's frustrating because I did actually see her. She's definitely still operating. I saw her at the yarn show that I was at on Friday, and she had all her stuff out and it all looked beautiful. But so I would say if you are one of those people that's messaged me and are interested in it, bear with me and I'll try and see if I can either get some more information, or you may well find that Jackie's website comes back up soon anyway. So I'm sure that she won't want it to be down for long. So I said last time I spoke to you that I wasn't gravitating towards this project, and I think that's because there's a little bit more work in it because of the fair aisle. But I did the body, and I don't actually remember exactly what I showed you last time. I think I had knitted the body. So this has come up to the this comes up to the armholes. So it's quite a cropped cardigan, and it's a steeked cardigan, and there is a steek on it somewhere. And it's just not that easy to find. And then I moved on to the sleeves, and I have knitted 2 sleeves coming along, and they're different, the sleeves. So they are the same fair isle patterns, if you like, but in different colours. And so they're really, these are just fabulous. Really been enjoying knitting these. To turn that way where the yarn's not on it. And so then I'm going to obviously attach it to the body and then do the yoke. So I'll join them all together so that I'm knitting in the round and doing the yoke all together in the round in one piece, and that will stay knitting circular as opposed to other cardigans where we go back and forth, don't we? Where we could, like this one, for example, because you're stopping here. But because this is steeked, I'm going all the way round, and then I will do the steek when I've finished the knitting. Then secure the steek and then undo it to create the cardigan. So yeah, as I say, it's really lovely. I've dropped one sleeve on the floor. Here we go. Oh yeah, I've really enjoyed it. The balls of yarn that I've got, that you may remember, those of you that watch me regularly, big bag of balls initially. Well, they're getting much lower now. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I wasn't sure about the colours, and I'm now a bit, I think I probably prefer that sleeve to that one in colourways. Do I? Well, let's see, So that has been so much fun, and I'm already thinking, when I spoke to Jackie at the wool show, I was talking to her about other patterns. She's working on a jumper version of this one, although, as she said, it wouldn't actually be that difficult to have if you had the cardigan pattern to convert it into the jumper yourselves. Actually, you just would lose the steek. But I still, nevertheless, I love the kind of combinations of the fair isle that much. I'm still really quite keen to give something else a go. Possibly, maybe when we move into the autumn, knowing all the knitting plans that I have in my head at the moment, there may not be room for another fair isle quite yet. And also, it's not so much fun to knit it in when it's hot. But yeah, that is my thinking. That is my plan with that, and it's I'm hoping it's not going to be that long before it's finished, and I can enjoy it looking at that. One other thing I would say about Jackie Blogg, she is on Instagram as well, so that is a way that you could contact her, and it's probably the way I'll try and contact her. So moving on to my next project that's on the needles is the Little Squares blanket, and I have done 2 strips. So this is yarn that I had from my Camel Yarns Advent, this Christmas just gone, and I'm using a West Yorkshire Spinners yarn for the cream yarn. So I've knitted 2 strips. I'm just trying to work out how I can show you there we go. I've knitted 2 strips. Each strip has 12 squares in it, and so you're knitting a square, you're then doing rows in between of the contrast colour, then you do the next square, and I'm doing it in the order that the Advent calendar came to me. And then when I did 12 squares in a strip. I decided that would make a good size blanket, and then moved on to the next strip with number 13 and carried on that way. So because I've added a few extra yarns into my Advent calendar, I've got 27 yarns, and that means that I've done these. I've still got 3 more to do before I go back to what was the first one, which was that one. And so that will mean that then gets offset. So instead of every other one being the same as the one before, it'll be a little bit more random. So yeah, I'm slightly disappointed. These 2 on the top are very similar, but as I say, that's not going to be repeated. So hopefully that won't be that much of an issue. And I think within the whole scheme of the blanket, I think that would be lovely. So yeah, you've done these strips. You've then picked up stitches along the edge and knitted that side strip. Then done the same with the second strip, and then mattress stitched. My goodness. Mattress stitched them together, and they're looking lovely. This is a wonderful meditative knit. I'm really enjoying it. I think it looks beautiful. Camel Yarns were also at the yarn show that I was at. We went up and said hello to them, or hello to her. I'm trying to think of her name. I can picture her, but I can't think of her name. And she had all her yarns up, and the colour palette is really lovely. It's very soft, and not many of the colours are ones that perhaps I would wear, because I tend to gravitate towards stronger colours. But I do love them in something like this. It is really beautiful. That said, now, which one is it, Frances? It's this one. I love this one so much that back last month, when she offered to dye any special ones that we wanted more of on the Advent calendar, I did jump at the chance and I got some more of that. And then I also got some fluff in, I think it might have been in that colour. No idea what I'm going to knit with them, but they're just so lovely. Sometimes it's a question of finding the yarn and finding something to knit with it, and sometimes it works the other way for me. So but yeah, they were really, really lovely colours, and I'm really enjoying it. As I say, yeah, it's just a really enjoyable thing to do late at night. So I've made no progress on my seagrass cowl. I think I've got, as you can probably tell, an awful lot of projects on my needles at the moment. And yeah, for that reason, I think there just is too much going on. It's not that I don't want to knit it, but I've talked about this before, about what I'm gravitating towards. And I think with that large selection of things to knit, and also prioritising my daughter's cowl, the blue one, I just haven't found time to knit everything. I'm just trying to think how many different things I must have on the needles at the moment. Something like 6 things, and that's not to mention those couple that have ended up sort of sitting in a basket. I'm going that way because there is a basket over the way in the corner on top of the cupboard of I think there's one project sitting in there that's kind of languishing a bit, and I'm not sure if it's going to get pulled out and restarted for something else. I don't know. Anyway, we digress. We don't need to talk about projects that haven't been finished. So my next thing that's on my needles and that I am still knitting at the moment is my, let's call it my rainbow sea glass. It's a little bit of a recreation, if you like, of mine. And so here it is. There's the back. There's the front. So this is where we've got to with this. And it's looking lovely. It's looking fun. It was interesting, actually, when I finished. I think when I spoke last, I was just coming to the end of this yoke, and it was looking a little bit scruffy, to be honest, I found when I finished the yoke. And so I blocked it, and it looked fabulous laid out blocked, and it looks so much better for blocking. I think what's happening is, of course, it's on a small needle because you've started on a small needle, and I haven't, or I may have gone up one size, but it was still a lot of stitches squeezed up, and that's making the fabric all squashed up. And perhaps this is knitted in, they're quite tweedy. There's Rowan Valley Tweed is the grey one, and this one is, going to put it up here because I can see the box, I can't see the name of it. It's yarn that I bought when I was up in Scotland. The manner of them, it just means that they do look a bit, when they're scrunched up, they just look a bit creased, I suppose. It's the best way of saying it. So I blocked it, and it looks so much better. But you can actually see, if you look here, that this also looks a little bit scrunched up lower down. You can really see, to my eye anyway, probably not nearly so obvious on camera, but I can see the difference between them. So you can there see, I'd done the blue at the bottom of the rainbow when I last spoke to you, so it's that bit below that I've managed to get done on it. And I mean, when I was doing the reindeer sweater that I did before Christmas, I made faster progress on that, but then that was because I was relatively monogamously knitting it, whereas I've got lots of other things on the go. But this has been good. I had this out. We went to Suffolk at the weekend, and while this in the car, I was knitting on that. It's a great one for doing that because you can do it I can do it even when it's dark. So I've got plenty of yarn, so I'm not sure if I necessarily need to do this. So I have this lovely cardigan actually, waterfall cardigan, which probably maybe slightly dates it, and it was a fibre spates pattern, and I'm not sure how old it is, but it must be. I must have knitted it 12 years ago or so. So let me just try and see if I can work out top and the bottom and where we are. There we go. So this is it here. It's lovely. It's an Aran weight cardigan. It's got like a little fleck you can see in the yarn. I'm quite sure it probably isn't a yarn that's available anymore, and you could see that the pattern had some kind of sea moss stitchy thing going on along here. So it was lovely, but what I really loved was this kind of ladder effect, and that ran down the back. But it doesn't hang right. I'm not sure whether I did something wrong, or I don't know whether I did something wrong or whether it was the pattern or whether it was, I'm not actually sure what happened, but it doesn't hang right, and it's lovely and warm, really nice. As I say, it's lovely yarn, but I don't wear it. And I'm, I think I've literally probably worn it once, and it's just not, it's not getting worn, and yet it's so beautiful. I mean, I'm just looking at my sleeve decreases there. I'm quite impressed with them, considering that, I don't know, 12 years ago or so, I would have said my knitting wasn't quite as it was. Well, I certainly had a lot less experience of knitting garments, particularly. So I mean, for example, I can see here, I didn't know mattress stitch back then. And this is not, the seaming is not nearly as nice as I would expect to find it on a garment that I've done these days. So I've decided that I'm going to frog this garment. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and it's such beautiful yarn, and as you can see, there's an awful lot of it. So I'm going to frog it. I'm going to unwind it into balls, and then I'm going to create turn it into skeins, probably just either on the back of a chair, two chairs together. That's how, because I did one last year. I knitted something, and I knew as soon as I finished knitting it and sewing it up that it just wasn't something I was going to wear. And so I frogged that and took the yarn back. And then once I've made it into skeins, I'm going to soak those skeins to lose the memory, because obviously the yarn will have all that sort of like crinkle effect, isn't it? I'll soak the skeins, and then I'm going to look for an Aran pattern. One idea I had, there is the Staffin, I think it was a jumper and a cardigan by Rebecca from the Cavapoo. So that's a possibility. It won't be something I think I plan to frog it and put it back into skeins and soak it sometime over the sort of spring, summertime, maybe before that. We'll see how quickly we get going with it. But I won't actually re-knit it, I think, until we move into the colder weather again, because this is quite a thick, heavy yarn, but it's soft as well. I'm holding it here, and it's also, it's really nice and soft. You could put it right up. This is my sensitive area, and you could put it right up under there. So, I thought, why not? Why not do that? Because if it's either that or it's going in a charity shop, and it just seems such a shame. I don't know whether somebody else would appreciate that lovely yarn. So, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I have been to a yarn show just before the weekend. It was the Unravel show in Farnham. It was a really lovely show, actually. I have to say, I really enjoyed it. It was a great vibe. I went there by train. So I went into London, and where did we go to? Waterloo. And then from Waterloo, I caught a train out to Farnham. And just as we were, before the train had even left Waterloo, there were a couple of ladies in front of me. One was Italian and one was Dutch, if I remember rightly. And they were wearing knitted neckwear. And they noticed that I was too. And so, of course, there was conversation. Are you going to the yarn show and so forth? So we got chatting. And then a lady came in next to us on the other side with a baby in a baby carrier. And initially I didn't think that she would necessarily be going to the yarn show, but no, she was. And when she took the coat off, you could see she had a beautiful jumper on. And so the four of us all got chatting for that sort of hour's journey that we had out to Farnham, sharing all our knitting, helping finding a pattern, talking about what we were hoping to buy or what we were looking for. So that was really lovely, and that was a great start. And then you have, from Farnham station, it's quite a nice walk through park largely to get there, to get to the Farnham Maltings, I think it's called. And there was lots of inspiration there. There were lots of people wearing lovely knitwear. Lots of the visitors were. I noticed the Polina pullover was really popular. So quite a number of people wearing that. And my eye was really caught by that jumper. I was really tempted about wearing that. I was thinking what you could do. You could have some hand-dyed yarn, colour-changing hand-dyed yarn for the flowers, and then with a plain yarn as the contrast, or as the main colour, if you like, and that could look really effective. So that's a little idea that I've got burning away there. While I was there, obviously, there's a number of stores that I was looking for, and the yarn tings that I talked about that I saw in Glasgow, that's the first time I think I'd come across her, or particularly noticed anyway. So I went and had a look at the stall amongst others while I was there, and she had a knitted up jumper, because that's what I was really looking for. I was looking for a bit of inspiration, to be honest with you. And and I definitely got that at the show. And on the yarning stall was a knitted sweater, the pattern Conspiracy of Ravens. I thought it was really lovely, and I really liked the way she had done it with her yarns. And so I chose, let's bring it up here. It's my purchases. This lovely yarn. I'm trying to see if it's got, it's called Nevermore. So that was my main colour that I have chosen. And it's going to be held with the fluff from there, which is from Loom. She had some lovely colours, some lovely yarns on her store. So those two are going to be held together. So that is my main yarn for my Conspiracy of Ravens jumper. And then I bought this one, which just keeps trying to undo, also from Yarntings, and just try to see if it's got a name. It hasn't actually got a name, this one. That's that beautiful colour. And I am going to hold this with this one from Skein Queen. I quite like the slightly greener, limey sort of colour that was coming into that. So this is going to be my Ravens. And this is going to be my main colour. So that is, I'm really excited about that. It's quite a it was quite an expensive project in the sense that you're holding two yarns together. Yeah, well, but if there's any yarn left over, it will get used for something else. So Charmaine from Yarntings did say to me she didn't think I needed all that amount of yarn for the contrast. However, I quite enjoy, as I've talked about many times before, using my leftover yarns for other things. So it was so beautiful. I was quite happy to do this. Just notice this floof is called Greenham Common. That will mean something to people of either a certain age or down a certain area of England. I also bought this lovely bag. So I've been looking for a bag. The bags vary enormously in price. I noticed some of the popular bag makers, some of the prices are really expensive. And the trouble is, I just don't feel I can. I mean, I've got a couple. I've got one where I've spent quite a lot of money on it. But it's, for me, obviously it needs to be well made, but it is also about it offering the size and the pockets and the things that I'm looking for. And I'm actually not that big on the pockets. I tend to throw it all in and not use the pockets that much. So that bit's not important to me. It is important to me that it can close, because I do worry about making sure that moths and what have you can't get into. That is important to me. So I bought this lovely bag, and I'm really pleased with this, and I like the pattern on it. I mean, that's another thing. I think it's got to be a pattern that I'm like, I really love that. Otherwise, if you don't love it, what's the point in spending the money on it? So got that one. I can't actually remember the name of it. I can picture the stall, but I can't actually remember the name of it. So if I can work it out, I will put it, I might have a look at my receipts, then I will put it in the notes. So what else did I buy? More importantly, I bought a couple of other hand-dyed skeins, which I'm thinking could be possibly contrast to go in a yoke, or a hat or something like that, but probably contrast in a yoke is where I'm really going with this. So I've got this one from Third Vault Yarns, which is a DK, and it's called, I think it says Stars Abound. And then I bought this one also from Yarntings, and this is called Connie's Eyes. And it was actually, Charmaine had gone on a break, and it's actually her husband who sold this to me. And he said that Connie was their cat. And I thought, oh, that's interesting colour for a cat size. But actually, he showed me a picture of the cat. We zoomed in on the eyes, and lo and behold, you could see those colours that we've got across here in her eyes. It was really quite spot on. It was quite effective. So I then bought, that was all my yarn. I did actually manage to keep to a reasonable, I saw lots of stuff I really liked, but with the Conspiracy of Crows pattern, I saw that and I thought, yes, I absolutely want to do that. And I could see that the yarn that they had was going to work with it. And so I really felt a pull to get that. With the other stuff, it was like, yes, I like that. I could order that online later. Took some photographs of some of the stuff I like, but there wasn't anything. I felt a desperate yearning to buy, and therefore I decided that I would hold off because, as you know, I've got plenty on the go, and so I didn't want to burden myself with too much or spend too much money, So I do, when I get my yarn, I mean, I've kept it all in a bag here to show you, but I will now put it into my clear bags to protect it from moths, and then I will write down what I've got in my book. I've got a sort of knitting book, if you like, and at the front it's got knitting projects that I've got the yarn for. So the Conspiracy of Ravens will go in that one, and then that will go into a box of yarn ready to knit. So when I want to move on to my next project, I know it's there. The odd skeins that I've got will go into a different one. So when I am looking for those odd skeins, that's there in there for that choice. Because I've talked about this before, I don't have a really good yarn shop near me. It was wonderful when I was staying down in Cornwall over last winter, because Stitches and Creamy is fabulous, and you can pretty much, I used to find almost 9 times out of 10, if I wanted a double knit yarn in a blue to go with my advent calendar, or like the yellow, this yarn was bought from Stitches and Creamy, I always seemed to manage. I was thinking, right, I know I want a yellow, and I know I want it in a sort of Aran stroke chunky type weight, and I found something. So I almost seem to always find what I'm looking for in there. That's quite special, to be fair. There's sadly not many places like that, and as I say, we haven't got anything similar to that. So I therefore do buy the yarn when I go to the yarn shows, and that's one of the reasons why I go to the yarn shows. I also met up when I was going there, and because I'd thought about going, and then a friend of mine said she was going, who lived much more locally, and I thought, oh, in that case, I'll definitely go, and it would be lovely to meet up with her. So I met up with my friend there. She's a friend that I met when we did the Woolen Walks tour in Scotland last year. So it was a really nice opportunity to. So we looked around I looked around myself a little bit. Then we sat down and had a sandwich and a cup of tea, and then we looked around again together, and then had another cup. So it was lovely to catch up, and lovely to have somebody to sit down and have a little chat with, and look at what everybody else was wearing and discuss what we could see going around the store. So that was lovely too. And I think for me, actually, that took a little. I think I've talked about sometimes feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but I think that helped having other people with me. I think it was the same when I was at the Glasgow School of Yarn. Stopped me feeling that it was such a. It mattered if I got the right yarn, or if I missed. It was going to be so important if I, didn't get the right thing, and all that kind of thing. Kind of took that pressure off me. So actually, that was really nice. So I really enjoyed this. And finally, there was this got these stitch stoppers. I've not used those. I've tried with different stitch stoppers and not had a lot of joy. So it'd be interesting to see. So they go on the end of your needles. So it'd be interesting to see whether I have any success with those. But I just rather like the colour. They look like little sweets, don't they? So yeah, I got lots. Actually, I would say I got a reasonable amount of yarn there. I didn't get too much because I've still got a few little bits and pieces left from School of Yarn. And I've also got quite a lot of the rowing yarn, which you'll often hear me talking about, that we had left when the shop closed. So, yeah, I'm quite happy that I got enough to, get some interesting bits and pieces into my knitting without going mad. So on the subject of buying yarn, something that I have been asked before was, will you often go and buy yarn without having a pattern planned for it? And I do, and that's because there isn't a yarn store near me. And quite often I'll see a pattern on Ravelry and I think, yes, I want to make that. But I haven't got any yarn in my stash for it. So by buying what I know is the right amount of yarn that I need for a jumper or for a cardigan, then I hopefully have got something that I can use for that. Obviously that only works to a certain extent, and generally really more on the plainer things. Otherwise sometimes, I do buy, obviously with the Conspiracy of Ravens, I bought the yarn specifically for that, and I have gone before and bought maybe I have one yarn and I'm looking for the other yarn, and I'll go around because that's what's great about looking at the yarn actually in person, is that you can decide. So for example, if I decided to put this into the yoke of a jumper, I might go and take this to find that right main colour to go with this, to use this as the contrast. But when I am just looking to buy a jumper's quantity of yarn or a cardigan's quantity of yarn, when I knitted when I bought the yarn for my reindeer jumper, I bought 7 skeins, and I did think that was probably a little bit excessive, but I wanted to be sure, and I wasn't completely sure about that. I know I need 3 skeins of 4-ply to make a fitted cardigan, and I've done that a few times, and I've got another quantity of that. I think it's in red now. I've got in my stash, but I wasn't quite sure with a jumper. But I bought 7, but I actually only used 4.5, which is about, if we're talking, and this is double knit, if we're talking 250 per skein, so you're talking about 1125 meters, 1125 meters. So that I now know really that when I'm looking for a jumper, I would buy 5 skeins of the double knit. Obviously, so for example, the Conspiracy of Crows, that's 2 yarns held together, but they are 4-ply, or the main one is 4-ply. So that's obviously got much more meterage in it. So that's all my knitting. Coming up in my life at the moment, what we're doing, I've got another trip coming up to Cornwall, not this weekend, next weekend. Got a fairly quiet weekend. My husband's going to the rugby, which will mean that Hugo and I will probably go and have a nice long walk and spend quite a bit of time in the garden, which is something. Now it's getting a little bit warmer, and starting to get the buds on things. There's certain things that need to be pruned and what have you, and I'm getting out doing that, and I really enjoy getting out in the garden doing that kind of thing, and obviously taking Hugo out on the walk. Talking of walks, coming up at the end of this, I've included some footage of our walks in Suffolk that we did last weekend. I've got some different footage for you to what I showed the last time we went. It was a cold winter's day. I think it was about 4 degrees, so we are very wrapped up, as is Hugo. But it's always lovely to get out there, and obviously we did what we usually do. We walked a bit, we stopped in a pub for lunch, then we walked a bit more and stopped in a pub for a hot drink to warm us up, and then we finished our walk and finished off by going into the pub and having another well, I could have an alcoholic drink, but my husband was driving, so obviously he didn't. But it's just lovely just to get it back into that warmth and sitting there. And Hugo loves to go into a pub. He's quite funny. It's slightly embarrassing actually, because he will actually literally pull us into, and it's because I think he gets attention. He enjoys the attention, and he enjoys people and dog watching. He'll meet other dogs in there, and he'll see other people and what have you. And certainly the last pub that we go into, which is a very regular pub that we go into a lot, have a pub dog. So there's a guaranteed at least one dog that he can go and say hello to. So that is all for now. That just leaves me to say thank you so much for watching. I gained a whole load of subscribers on the last video, so if you were one of those and you've watched all the way through on this video, hello, thank you so much. So lovely to have lots of new people on board along with our lovely group of knitters that we've already got. So I'm going to be doing more knitting, more walking, and I will catch back up with you in a few more weeks. I don't know, maybe 3 weeks or so. We'll see how we go with the knitting and what else is going on in my life. But I'll catch you up with what's going on, and hopefully I will have something finished to show you then. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.